a little bit different of a project work on today. I'm trying to do a little bit of transmission service, and I'm trying to get a little bit of firmer shifting. For those of you that are on bigger tires, you know that they kind of shift slow. Once you start going to bigger tires, it almost feels like you're kind of towing all the time just because of the added rotating mass of all the tires and stuff. So what I did is I bought a line pressure gauge tester to see if my line pressure is low, because that is adjustable if you take the pan off. I don't really want to go full valve body or anything on this. I just want to keep it pretty Toyota and reliable. So I'm testing the line pressure of it, and I'm also going to be dropping the pan, replacing the filter, regasketing it, and I will be adding I think it's a Sonax valve. I'll show it a little bit later here. What it does is it increases the amount of flow, like volume wise, but it also increases the line pressure. So I wanted to see where I was at to start with to make sure I didn't go over the top or way over the max pressure that Toyota recommends, so I don't start blowing out seals and stuff like that in the trans. Alright guys, this is kind of hard to film by myself and with the gauge coming in from underneath the truck. If you use one of these gauges, this is just a cheap Amazon one, so use it more as a reference than a finite thing. But mind you, my transmission's about 150 degrees right now, and the transmission has about 185,000 miles on it, and I've done full flush fluid services every 30,000 since I got it. I'm not going to do that this time because it has so many miles on it now. I'm just going to do drop the pan, or drain the fluid out of it, which is usually about 6 quarts out of the 12, and then put new fluid in. The fluid in it still looks really good. So basically when we start it, it should be around 52 psi, and then in park or in drive it should be, I believe, 52 to 70 something, and then in reverse it should be 72 to like 89 psi at idle, not under load. Before you do all of this, check and make sure that your stall is correct anyway, to make sure that the converter or something's not going out. I'm not having any issues besides wanting to get a little bit firmer shifting out of it and stuff like that. So we're idling right about 50, so we're just a little bit low. And now let's go to neutral, and then we're going to drop it down to drive. So it's right at the bottom. It's right about 50, 52 psi at the bottom. So that's at the very bottom of the threshold that Toyota says is okay. And you can be upwards of 72. Now we'll go back to neutral, now we'll go to reverse. And reverse is supposed to be 72 to 89, and right now we're about 75. And then first gear should be as well in the 52 to 75 range. So as you can see, all of that's just a little bit low. I'll show you once I get into pan. Pressure regulator, or pressure valve, whatever you want to call it, has 3 settings on it. And when you do pan services, or if you have a shop do pan services, they should be checking this to see what it's actually running at, because as stuff wears out, the pump gets a little bit weaker, you get more miles on it, the clutches are start to wear a little bit, stuff like that. You can up the line pressure if it's low, and heat and slipping in an auto is the worst thing for it. So if you can make them grab firmer and shift quicker, that's usually better, but you also fight being too much and start blowing out seals and stuff like that. So that's the stuff that you definitely want to avoid. Excuse me. So we're going to shoot for the top of the threshold and maybe a little bit over, because this new valve and spring that I got says that you're supposed to be 10% over what you were. That's what it's supposed to increase, as long as increasing flow. So it shouldn't make like the aftermarket valve body would make it like slam gears in like the lower RPM range too. This should allow it to come up in the RPM range, shift normally, add a little bit or reduce the shift time, and shift delay so it grabs faster, creates less heat. And then when you're really high in the RPM range and shifting, or when the truck shifts high or downshifts or something like that, it should shift quicker, kind of more like it has a valve body in it. All I was going to do is drain the pan and adjust it, but then I found this valve. I think it was like $100 shipped here, so I'm going to give that a try. I'm not a huge fan of not putting Toyota parts back into stuff, especially drivetrain. The engine transmission on this is completely stock, and that's why I want to keep it reliable. That's why it's lasted 185,000 miles. But I do monitor all of this stuff really good, so if I start noticing anything weird, I can always result back to what I had in there previously. So I'm going to do that, and then so I have to pull a skid plate, drain it, drop the pan, and do all of that. So I'm going to be working on that here in a minute, and probably not going to film dropping the skid plate and draining it and stuff like that. I'll start talking again once we actually get into the transmission, and make a little bit more sense that way. Alright, so I got the pan off, dropped the skid plate, got the pan off, and that's a filter I'm going to replace. It's just 4 bolts, slide it out. I forgot to get the O-ring for the filter, so I'm going to have to reuse the old one, and hopefully that it's still in fine condition, so that will be a little bit of a risk there, but maybe, if anything, I'm probably run to the auto parts store and get a filter kit or something and just steal the filter out of it. But I have a Toyota filter and Toyota gasket for this. This is the pressure valve that I was talking about earlier. Right now it's on the second setting, so the fact that it's on the second setting already, and it still is a little low on pressure, that makes me want to, on the one that I'm putting in there, go to the third setting, just to up the pressure as much as I can. If I up it here, from what I could tell online, it seems like each one will give you a 10 psi increase. So if I went to here, I would be up back in the threshold like I want to be. So that other one increases it by 10%, and if I go to the third one, I should be right at the top of the threshold for the pressure. It is nice to see everything looks super clean in here. None of the solenoids look like they got a ton of grime or anything on them, so I'm just going to leave all that alone and get this all swapped out here. So this is the factory valve and spring. You can kind of see how it looks. This in here, it does seem like this piece that goes inside fits super loose compared to the new one, but the new one is aftermarket, so it could be, that could be all is the difference there. So yeah, and it does have some grime on it. And then this is the new one. It's also aluminum, and then it has holes in the side versus those big slots, and then it has that big notch there. Alright, so this does seem like it has quite a bit more spring pressure than the old one, but it says if you put it back in the same position as the old one, you'll get another 10%. So if it's already at 52%, another 10% on top of that should only be like 5 psi. So that should only give me to 55, and I can go up to 72. And if each one of these is 10 psi, is just what I was told. I don't know if that's true or not. I wish I had more information on it. So if I go 10 more psi, that'll put me at 65, which still should put me under the tops. Alright, this is pretty interesting. So this is in drive. Each one of those marks is 5 psi. So we went from 50 to almost 65, probably about 62 So that's a 12 psi increase in drive. So is about right from moving it up a notch, adding 10 psi, and then a 10% increase from the spring and that new valve. And then we go to reverse. Reverse is over 75. That's about 80 right there. Reverse could be up to 89. So that's exactly what we were looking for. I was hoping for maybe a little bit more line pressure. But the transmission's also only 138 degrees. It's 150 earlier. So we will see what kind of increase we get when it's a little bit warmer. And it's also brand new fluid as well. So yeah, we went up about 10 psi on both sides, which is exactly what we were looking for. This is what the filter screen ended up looking like. You can see there's definitely residue on it. And when you look up in there, there's definitely some metal flakes and stuff, which is, again, this filter has 180 something thousand miles on it, so I don't think any of that is abnormal. All in all, this was super easy, and I'm really glad I did it. Guys, next day here, a couple things that I messed up on was the drive pressure threshold is actually 52 to 62, not 52 to 72. And then I forgot to mention, I mentioned something about testing the stall on your converter before you do all this. If you're having any issues or anything, which luckily I'm not, but if you were having issues with something like that, check your stall converter. And what you can do to do that, if you're on a smaller tire, you might want to use four-wheel drive to do this. But if you put your foot completely on the brake, put the truck in drive, push the foot brake in as far as you can, and then full throttle, and then the tack will come up. And you don't want to do this very long. You don't want to do it very many times in a row, because it's getting up on the converter is hard on it, and it heats the transmission up very fast. If you don't have a temperature gauge or anything like that, you can quickly overheat it. And that should be between 2250 and 2550, I believe. So I checked that first. I'm right at like 2300 or something like that. So that's one of the other things you want to check. And then that's the other way you check the line pressure when you're up on the converter. So mine before was below, like 10 psi below the bottom of the threshold. And now it's well within the threshold, like right in the middle. And again, it's an Amazon gauge, so I was more using it as a reference to see the PSI increase than trusting the pressure on the gauge too. And the fittings were not very high quality, so I didn't want to break one of those off in the transmission or something like that. So it had a little bit of a leak, and obviously you're going to lose pressure there as well. So now in drive, I'm like 64 psi, which is a little bit above the top of the threshold, which is fine because I wanted to increase the pressure 10% over anyway. In reverse, I'm right at the top. Before in reverse, I think you can be up to 79 in reverse or something like that, or maybe it's 82, I can't remember. But I'm like right there. And then before in drive, I think you're supposed to be 190 to 214 when you're in drive and when you're up on the converter. And before I was like 180, and now I'm like 198 or something like that. So it's right up where I want it to be. Again, this transmission has a lot of miles on it. The converter's definitely probably loosened up a little bit, and the pump could be weak. So I'll take all that into consideration, and take into consideration it's an Amazon gauge. So I don't know exactly how perfect it is, but that was enough information for me to know that I'm back where I want to be. Before, when I was shifting, it would be kind of lazy, and kind of what they call in like drag racing a flare on the shift, where right when it starts to enter the shift, it actually climbs RPM when the transmission's unlocked. So right when it starts to shift, it climbs RPM without accelerating at all, and then it'll drop back down to where the shift point is supposed to be, versus just being like a quick snappy shift. And when you're super high in the RPM range, it's not gonna really do that, but the shift's not gonna be super fast. So now, and I have a video that I'll play at the end right here. Now, when it comes up in that normal RPM range, so above 2,500 RPMs, that shift is quick and it doesn't flare at all. So this wasn't a wheeling video and it's a little bit different, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and it gave some more information on the A750, which these are in like Land Cruisers, FJs, 4Runners, Tacomas. They're in a bunch of things. If you haven't seen it, we just last week did a video at Reader Pit with the guys, and it's a pretty cool video. I also just recently did a new fresh walk around video, so you can check that out as well. I appreciate you watching, and thank you, and hopefully you'll subscribe. It's like right down there. All you gotta do is hit it. I really just want 1,000 subscribers, and I'll be honest, at 1,000 subscribers you can start monetizing videos and making some money off of it. At 1,000 subscribers you don't make anything, but at least it's a goal for now to start making money, and then once I do, I'll be more motivated to do this stuff more often.